66. Currently 61. Next news at 9. And Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. And this exchange between former PayPal COO and now big tech investor David Sachs and Daffy reporter, is there any other kind, from Bloomberg TV, Emily Chang, is so instructive. Emily Chang querying David Sachs about why, in fact, how dare he host a fundraiser for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
I do want to ask you about the fundraiser you're hosting for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who obviously is a very divisive figure, has made some choices that are questionable when it comes to public health. I know that you don't necessarily agree with all of them, but why do you support such a divisive candidate, especially given the global health crisis we are still facing?
Why is he inherently more divisive than, say, Gavin Newsom or someone on the other side of the spectrum? See, what I would argue is that words like polarizing and divisiveness, they assume a normative baseline in which everybody agrees. Everyone in the tech industry agrees because they all come from a certain information bubble. And anyone who deviates from that orthodoxy is perceived as divisive. I would argue that the country, there's a multiplicity of views, and you're not divisive just because you don't agree with the orthodoxy of Silicon Valley.
Wow, what a revolutionary thought that somebody in Silicon Valley can deviate from the political orthodoxy in that community. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by our old friend Andrew Klavan, podcaster, Another Kingdom, host of The Andrew Klavan Show at the Daily Wire, and screenwriter of the movie Gosnell, The Trial of America's Biggest Serial Killer, among other great works from Andrew. Andrew, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Great to be here, Dan. Thanks.
So, Emily Chang, and as representative of the D.C. Press Corps, I mean, how could somebody, you're from the tech industry, how are you hosting a fundraiser for Ron DeSantis? He's divisive.
It was a great answer from Sachs, because it's exactly the problem we have. And I think it's the reason we're all at each other's throats, is that the left completely dominates the communications industry and therefore is operating in a bubble and trying to put that bubble over the rest of us. I mean, they own Hollywood, they own the news business, the major news outlets, they own the academy, they own the publishing industries, they own social media, they own virtually every aspect, every way that we communicate with one another. And they actually are operating under a thesis that if they can change everybody's mind, or at least silence anybody who disagrees, that reality itself will shift. You can get kicked off social media for saying that a man can't become a woman, which is a simple fact, because they think that it will cease to be a fact if nobody is allowed to say it. So the reason I think so many of us hate one another is that this bubble that they're in is a bubble that they're trying to push on the rest of us. And anybody who stands up and says, I disagree with X, I disagree with Y, no matter what it is, becomes divisive, becomes hateful, becomes racist, all the things that they use to silence dissent.
Andrew, I wanted to ask you about all these vaccine mandates. Right now in Seattle, they're at stage 3 operation emergency. They're down 300 cops. Hundreds more are not going to be working tomorrow because of they refuse to get vaccinated. And we're facing a similar problem here in Chicago this weekend. We have a vaccine mandate that expires at 11:59 p.m. on Friday. And what do you think about that? Because now nurses are off the job, doctors, teachers, and now police officers.
Yeah, well, I'm a great believer in vaccines in general, and I don't think anybody should get their vaccine information from you or me or anybody but their doctor. I think you should go to your doctor and talk to them. I'm totally against these mandates. Obviously, each person has to choose what he puts in his body, and it's kind of comical in a tragic way to see Chicago, where people are being killed by gangs and by criminals much more quickly than they're being killed by germs. to see them worrying about tormenting people about their medical decisions while not refusing to prosecute gang members who go out and shoot one another in the streets because they're having what did your prosecutor say? He said they're having a mutually agreed upon conflict.
Yeah, mutual combat.
Yeah, so that's not illegal, but it is illegal to say, you know what, I'm not putting that in my body. Listen, there are people who shouldn't be taking vaccines. There are people who just have to decide for themselves what risks they want to take. Everything is a risk in this case, but you want to decide which risk you take. And the idea that the government, which has been wrong about almost everything for the last 50 years, should be the people who make these decisions. The idea that a guy like Dr. Fauci, who's clearly a corrupt fool, should be telling you what to do, and the news media should be circling the wagons around this clown to tell us that this man is science, is just part of this problem. It's part of the problem. It is why we can't talk to one another. Why would, if you were a leftist and you're surrounded by leftist media and you're being reconfirmed in all your beliefs and you have confirmation bias being operated almost as a militant movement by the government, why would you come and talk to a guy like me who might have a different point of view? You know, I'm a racist, terrible, evil, sexist, bad guy. Why would you talk to me? And listen, this serves the government. It serves the government for people to be at odds with each other. They like it when black people and white people disagree. They like it when left and right won't come together. That serves the people in power. When the people, us, are fighting with each other, we're not looking at them. I truly, truly believe that any time the word racist comes out of a guy's mouth in public, it means that he's distracting you from some other thing that he himself is doing, that race is almost always a distraction. And I think if we don't think like that, if we don't think like, hey, why does my neighbor disagree with me? Why does he have, a Black Lives Matter sign? Maybe I should go and talk to him instead of going and talking to some jerk on CNN who's selling the corporate government line. Maybe we should talk to one another and meet each other in meetings and confront our school boards in meetings and do all those things that they don't want us to do instead of being at each other's throats.
But the mandates are emblematic of the statist, which is one size fits all.
Well, right. This is the thing. The whole idea of socialism, which is the left's basic goal, is immoral. And we on the right have been foolish about this. We like to point out that socialism doesn't work, and that's why we think it's immoral. But it's really the other way around. It doesn't work because it's immoral. And it's immoral for a simple reason. It puts forward a fantasy instead of to cover up the malignant truth. And the fantasy is that you can trust the state to basically run production, to run energy, to run where your money is spent, to distribute your wealth, because the state is going to be a beneficent actor. That's not true. There is no such thing as a beneficent state. There are only people with power. And all of history has taught us that people with power are corrupt. The more power they have, the more corrupt they become. And when they have all the power, they become ultimately corrupt. And so those are the people that you're handing power over to if you're a socialist. And the illusion that there's a beneficent state is oddly enough created by free capitalist states. Because if you have a constitution that limits the power of government, you're going to limit the corruption of the people in government. And over time, over the centuries, as the constitution takes hold, the people in government are going to start to behave well. Remove those limits and give them all the power that socialism gives to government, and they will become corrupt. And it's hilarious to see a guy like Bernie Sanders, who has supported the slave state of the Soviet Union. He supported the slave state of Cuba. He supported the socialist murderers in Nicaragua. It's hilarious to tell him, well, no, that's not what we want. What we want is Norway and Sweden. Well, people in Norway and Sweden are saying, we're not socialists. We're capitalists. We tried socialism and we got rid of it. They got rid of it because it doesn't work, but also it's immoral. You cannot trust people with that much power.
I want to get your take on hypocrisy and pointing out the left's hypocrisy and what value you associate with that. Let me give you an example. John Gruden, the former now Las Vegas Raiders coach, who was bounced for intemperate comments and private emails with a front office executive at the Washington football team. Madden 22, EA Sports put out a statement. Madden's popular football video game. EA Sports is committed to taking action and maintaining a culture of inclusion and equity. Due to the circumstances of John Gruden's resignation, we are taking steps to remove him from Madden NFL 22. We will replace him with a generic likeness via a title update in the coming weeks, just like, we'll replace the Redskins with Washington Football Club. Now, EA Sports not removing Kareem Hunt or Zeke Elliott, both suspended for beating women up, not removing Tyreek Hill, suspended for child abuse, allegedly breaking his kid's arm. And they're not suspended. They're not going to be expunged from the Madden NFL video game. John Gruden is. Is it useful to point out that hypocrisy, or are we to more properly understand that the left embraces their hypocrisy as part of their status as the enlightened class, and by pointing it out, you're not really moving the needle at all. People see it. This is not difficult to discern, and we need to get beyond just pointing out hypocrisy.
Well, yeah, I think we do need to get beyond just that, because there's a point, there's a purpose to what they're doing. There's a method to their madness. I mean, let's talk about what happened. John Gruden, who's a famous loudmouth, he's a hilarious commentator. I liked him better as a commentator than as a coach, because he was just a funny guy who says whatever comes out of his mouth. In a private email 10 years ago, said something kind of untoward. You know, it was untoward in a private email. It was not his public self. It was not his expression of his full opinions. It was something he said between two people. They're investigating behaviors at the Washington football team, right? That's what they're investigating. They're investigating in NFL sanctioned behaviors that are going on. And so they expose all these emails, and the only email they release is John Gruden. And this is a perfect example of what I was saying before. This is a distraction. He is being sacrificed. John Gruden is being sacrificed in order to cover up all the other emails they unearthed, which they are not releasing, which actually was the thing they're investigating. The only thing they came up with is John Gruden was a loudmouth, which you could have asked me or John Gruden about any time. Here's the thing. In individual commentary, in personal emails and personal conversation, we all say things. We all say crazy things. We say things that are not good. We say things that, we don't want to repeat. We call up our friends and say, oh man, I had a couple of drinks. I said something last night I regret. It's nobody's business but yours. It is nobody's business but yours. The question is, how does John Gruden treat his players? How does he treat the people around him? Does he stop anybody from progressing? It's a complete distraction from their corruption. When every single time you hear somebody say racism, ask yourself what that guy is doing. When the head of the NFL is willing to release his personal emails for the last 10 years, then I'll listen to what he has to say about John Gruden's personal emails, which he has the perfect right to send. He has the perfect right to say any damn thing he wants. I don't have to approve of it. I'm not his brother. I'm not his mother. I don't have to call him up and say, John, you're a naughty boy. And neither do the rest of us. What we have to do is watch our public officials and our corporate leaders and what they're doing. And the way they keep us from looking at that is by screaming racism, sexism, and all the other emotional tags that they use to keep us from looking at what they're doing. What do you care if John Gruden occasionally says an untoward thing? How does that affect your life? It doesn't affect your life. It doesn't affect the football player's life. It doesn't affect anything. What really does affect things is what the NFL is doing behind the scenes that they are now covering up by using John Gruden as a sacrificial lamb.
Your constant call is about building our own castles when it comes to what you were referencing earlier, the leftist control of these cultural institutions and information channels. And I wonder how you think we're doing, particularly against the backdrop of what's happening in the culture, at building more castles so that you can build community around those castles effectively.
Right. Well, listen, I've been banging this drum a long time, and I can definitely say that when I started talking about the culture to conservatives, I might as well have been talking to a brick wall. Over the last 20 years, that has changed. We at the Daily Wire, we're making movies now. We're doing all kinds of cultural things, trying to affect the culture. But this is a generational fight. The left planned this and did it from the 60s on. They took over the communications means in this country and the cultural mechanisms in this country over the course of decades. This is not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen because somebody makes a movie. It's not going to happen because somebody writes a book. It's a slow trek of building not just the structures that create culture, but also the structures that comment upon and reward culture. I mean, we don't give awards for the things we do. The other day at the Daily Wire, we exposed a story in Loudoun, Virginia, where a school board covered up a rape that happened because they let a transgender kid into a bathroom. Okay, we exposed that. Nobody's going to give us a prize for that. Why? Because the right isn't smart enough to build organizations that give prizes for good journalism. We are going to do that, but it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time to overcome the left's successful multi-generational multi-generational push to take over the culture. They won, we lost. Now we have to start fighting back. It's going to be a long haul, but we got to support it. And each person has to do it by speaking out, by not being afraid, by not saying, oh, if I keep my head down, they won't come for me. Maybe they'll come for the guy next to me. All of us have to do this. And we have to do it by not attacking. Look, it can't be Christian rock. It can't be us doing what they do for our purpose. We have to build a new thing. And that's going to take time. It's going to take artists. It's going to take creators. It's going to take businessmen like Jeremy Boring, who runs the Daily Wire. It's going to take guys like that of Vision who do the things that the left did. And the difference for us is they took over institutions that were already there. We're not going to be able to take them back. We're going to have to build our own. So this is hard work, but it has begun. And and to me, that is just incredibly inspiring and affecting that it has at last, it has started. And I think we can win.
He is Andrew Klavan. He is the host of The Andrew Klavan Show at The Daily Wire, thedailywire.com. Screenwriter of the movie Gosnell, The Trial of America's Biggest Serial Killer. And to check out his most recent column, he was discussing At the Heart of Our Divisions over at City Journal. Andrew, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Always great talking to you. Thanks.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
One of the things